My name is Craig Ashton with the law firm of Ashton and Price, and ultimately what we try to do on this show is distill topical events into their legal essence. Ultimately, what does that mean? That means that we're curious, and you've been treated to the best of all things legal for the past couple weeks because I've had the good fortune to be in Thailand celebrating my brother's 39th birthday, allegedly. But the moral of the story is it's great to be back. Thailand, if you've never been there, is an unbelievably beautiful place called the Land of a Thousand Smiles, and I would wish you sawadee kap. Tim Hodson is joining me this morning. Tim, nice to see you.
Good morning. Good to be here.
And Ed Shady.
Heidi ho.
And as I always say, and Ed takes on the chin every time I say it, but this is the time you want to listen to a shady attorney.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So basically today we'll be talking about Rajon Rondo and his homophobic rant against Bill Kennedy, who recently came out as practicing an alternative lifestyle. Bottom line, the NBA says, look, it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. We just want a good referee, and this guy's a good referee. And we'll talk about the difference between the First Amendment and how the First Amendment would protect this sort of speech versus that sort of speech within the confines of employment. Example, if my receptionist decided to say, welcome to Berg Injury Lawyers. The First Amendment would protect her if the government said you can't say that. She'd be able to say that, but I would fire her because she works for Ashton and Price. So the point is that the parameters of free speech are curtailed significantly within the confines of an employment setting versus the government imposing their will for the content of your speech. We're going to break something down which is right in the wheelhouse of Edward Shady, who played college college water polo.
It's close.
Yeah, I've seen you in a Speedo, and it's water polo, not volleyball for sure. So what happened in this case is we have a 15-year-old boy who was going to Alcalanes High School in Lafayette, playing Bellarmine, which is a school that we used to play because I went to Sarah High School. Same school that Barry Bonds went to, and then Tom Brady.
Bellarmine's pretty impressive when you get out to that campus, too.
Yeah, it's cool. When I was there, they beat us every year in football, but I was on the tennis team. I think we beat them 2 out of 4 years that I played varsity there. So anyway, what happened is this 15-year-old, which is in the 2-meter area, which is apparently near the goal, correct?
Yeah, correct. You got a 2 and a 5 meter, and you can't be in the 2 meter without the ball if you're on offense.
So one of the themes today is the importance of video in regards to evidence. So somebody was videotaping these two boys kind of wrestling underwater. Apparently, it's kind of like ducks. They look like they're not moving much until you look underwater, and there's a lot of activity. So he allegedly kicked the Bellarmine boy in the nose, broke his nose, caused surgery. And the interesting thing is that he's been charged with felony assault and battery. So it's a felony. So the idea is we're going to talk about whether or not the criminal justice system ought to be involved, because think about professional hockey or when Juan Marichal went after that pitcher with a baseball bat and hit him. I mean, those things were never prosecuted criminally. They were dealt with within the confines of the rule of Major League Baseball, the NBA.
Civilly, if it came up.
NHL. So the idea is this is super unusual. You almost never see this. There's a primary assumption of the risk we'll talk about. We'll talk about the criminal justice system vis-a-vis sports and whether or not this is an appropriate use of our resources with the state of California, essentially through the district attorney in Walnut Creek moving forward against this boy for a felony, because this could ruin his life. I mean, pretty much you get a felony, it's going to be very difficult for him to find employment. We'll talk about Google cars and self-driving cars. Apparently 4 vehicles have been in accidents, 3 with Google, 1 with Delphi. We talked about before I went off to Thailand, a Google car was pulled over for going 24 and I think in a 45, right?
It's under the speed limit.
Yeah. Right. So the idea is going too slow can be in violation of the unsafe speed for condition, 22-350. So the idea is that we'll talk about whether or not these cars are going 10 or too slow, and then we'll talk about the new rules that are proposed by the DMV in regards to who bears liability, what do they do with the information that's collected when you're behind the wheel, who's legally responsible for drunk driving. Then the federal government also stepped up and is now encouraging autonomous vehicles. Ed, you made a good point. Google said, well, why do we take away why do we need a steering wheel and brakes if they're driving as safely as a human being? And your point was,
we'd be out of business if human beings drove that safe.
Yeah, I know. So human beings, the whole point is you don't want to drive as safe as a human being because human beings are dangerous. So we'll talk about that. Ford is basically putting now vehicles on the road as well. So we've got Ford, Mercedes, Google. I think we've got BMW. We've got Tesla, Nissan, Honda. So it's coming, and it's coming fast. So we'll talk about the new liability rules in regards to who's responsible when a driverless vehicle gets in an accident. And we'll talk about the other issues pertaining to the rules that are being proposed by the DMV, which I think will be pretty interesting. We'll talk about criminals with cameras. Essentially, one of the themes of our show over the last year or so has been how technology has driven a lot of changes in the way the legal system works. We'll talk about drones today. We've got video cameras. We've got self-driving vehicles. This case with this boy, 15, he wouldn't have been charged but for the fact that some parent was probably going, he's basically manhandling my son who's a Bellarmine, and he watches him kick his son or her son in the nose, and then they present that to the Walnut Creek police, and the district attorney gets involved, and charges are filed. And that would not happen without video. So we've got a guy who blocked the busiest highway in Houston, 145, to propose to his girlfriend, now his fiancée, because she said yes, even though this guy's a numbskull. And the idea is that he put this on Instagram, and then the Houston police got a hold of it and said, hey, that's illegal. Then we've got an even stupider criminal who's drunk out of her mind and goes on Periscope and puts it on Twitter while she's driving DUI. And so these kind of people deserve to be arrested. And
Yes.
that is a great tool for law enforcement, because once it's on video, that is some of the best evidence possible, because what you say, if it's inconsistent with the pictures, you're toast.
You're toast. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
picture
start-
speaks 1,000 words, as they say.
Start thinning out the herd on the highway.
And then, as we've been jokingly saying, because Ashton and Price were primarily personal injury attorneys, and the idea for us is it's never about money. It's about your health. And when you get in an auto accident, you get injured, we get you to some great medical care. So we're never encouraging or trying to make a profit off other people's misery. What we try to do is help them through the process. But we always joke, once driverless cars, once they're autonomous and there's no accidents occurring, then essentially we will be out of a job in that regard. But what we have to save us, I think, are drones.
Yes.
So there
Drone law.
are new FAA regulations regarding drones, which are coming out in regards to having to register them. So we'll talk about the issues pertaining to registration. We'll talk about negligence. We'll talk about the fines under the FAA. We'll talk about the rules of negligence, which would apply to you, which should be outside of the FAA rules. And then we'll talk about products liability. If we get to it, we'll talk about the U.S. Muslim teen that was in Texas and came to school with what looked like a bomb, but he said it was a reworked clock, ended up getting handcuffed, and has subsequently moved to Qatar, where he received a scholarship, but is now suing the school district for $15 million.
Yeah, in Irving, Texas. Good luck with that.
So, well, for me, the kid probably handcuffing, probably not a good idea.
No.
But the bottom line is, in this day and age, when you show up to school with something that even remotely resembles a bomb, there are going to be ramifications, and you're going to have to be pulled aside. So we'll talk about, he's suing for defamation. So what we'll talk about is the difference between statement of fact versus opinion. And I think that'll be pretty interesting. Basically, the Sacramento City Council is basically considering now moving forward with a soccer stadium. And if we have time, we'll talk about that and how we got to this through the rules of election law, through eminent domain. The downtown arena, $500 million. There's $300 million peripheral investment. Kaiser's putting in a $500 million hospital. There's now revitalization of K Street. So all this stuff is happening, billions of dollars. And the governor just moved into the old governor's mansion, because bottom line is downtown is becoming vibrant. And it all happened as a result of all these legal issues that we talked about. All right, well, hopefully that seems interesting to you. When we come back, we'll go ahead and talk about Rajon Rondo and the First Amendment and the homophobic slur that he uttered. And we'll do that after a break. This is All Things Legal on Money 105.5. All right, we're back. This is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal on Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network.
Casual too.
Essentially, if you've never listened to the show, as we always say, we're curious personal injury attorneys that distill topical events into their legal essence. What does that mean, we're curious? I was in Thailand for the last 13 days. most of that. I took 4 days to travel. Day and a half ago, I left Phuket, Thailand, got to Singapore, had an 11-hour layover, flew into Seoul, South Korea, spent 3 hours there, and ultimately made it back to San Francisco, and then had a 3-hour drive. So it took me 39 hours. So yesterday was a bit rough for me, a bit of a jet lag. This morning, I feel like a champion. And glad to be back on the show, and glad to be back in the office, and all the trust that our clients are showing us, and to celebrate the holidays with my friends and family is a blessing. So anyway, when we took the break, we were talking about Rajon Rondo. I was in Thailand when this occurred, but apparently he used a term in Mexico City where they were playing. Who were they playing
Celtics.
against? The Celtics. And he used a word that starts with F and rhymes with maggot. That's a homosexual slur to a referee who had not come out at the time, Bill Kennedy, but subsequently came out after the slur was uttered.
Correct.
Which I thought was very brave. So the point is, the NBA said, look, bottom line, your sexual orientation makes no difference in regards to your skill set as a referee, which is as it should be. And Rajon Rondo was suspended for a game. Some people wonder how that can happen if the First Amendment protects that sort of speech. Well, just to reorient you, the First Amendment says that Congress shall pass no law to abridge the citizens' right to free speech. But this is not Congress acting, so it's not the federal government, this is the NBA. Within the confines of a business setting, and in your own house, anywhere that's private, you can curtail speech.
Yep.
And the NBA says, look, this is not in the best interest of the NBA, just like Donald Sterling, when he was audio taped in violation of the criminal code for two-person consent. It still was used and put out, and he ended up, really getting hammered by selling the Clippers for $2 billion.
Yeah.
So during the midst of the fact that when he was in Vegas with his wife, he said, hey, for your 70th birthday, I think today we'll celebrate by consulting with 2 neurologists.
Giving you a mental test.
Who came back and said, yeah, you're incompetent.
Happy birthday, you're incompetent.
So this incompetent guy.
Rajon's going to go, hey, can I get a new contract now?
Yeah.
So I think Steve Ballmer is the guy who bought and he used to be with Microsoft, and he was voted the most incompetent CEO in the United States at the time. And so we had the incompetent CEO negotiating with the legally incompetent Donald Sterling. And Donald Sterling, I think, won that by getting $2 billion
Yeah,
for
I
the
think
team.
he came out on the right side of that.
So the point is that the NBA can do this because it's not the federal government or a government entity saying you can't say this. Because if you want to say this, you can. The only way that this would be curtailed if these were considered fighting words or inciting words, in other words, inciting violence. So when you're inciting violence or you're saying something that is so disgusting that a reasonable person would act in a violent way, then that can be curtailed. But beyond that, the government really can't step in and basically curtail content. It's only time, place, and manner. There was a recent case where somebody was wearing a Star Wars shirt to school, and they said, you have to take that off because one of the stormtroopers was shooting at someone.
Oh, my God.
And so the idea is that they can't wear any T-shirt that connotes violence. And the idea is that they're not saying you can't have that depiction. They're just saying the time, place, and manner in terms of a rational relation to a government state interest is that we don't want to have any sort of depiction of any sort of violence. I think you're taking a little bit too far with Star Wars, but I can see the connection.
Well, there's a controversy right now with senior portraits too, because like it's a local one. I don't know what school she goes to, but she's an archery athlete. I don't know if there's another name for it, but she's an archer. Yeah, and she wanted her senior picture of her basically pulling back the tether on her bow, and it's a pretty cool shot, but it looks like she's almost aiming to shoot you is what it looks like. I don't think that was the intent of the picture, but that's exactly what it looks like. And they denied her senior portrait in the yearbook because it looks like she's trying to commit violence with the bow and arrow.
So she's trying to do the the Hunger Games maneuver.
Exactly. No, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of it, but that's exactly what she was doing.
Hunger
Yeah, it's exactly what she was
Katniss or
emulating.
whatever,
yeah.
If you're going to take like the Star Wars picture, you see some of these mascots and then the pictures they'll put on their shirts when they show up to games with whatever their team is choking out the other team.
Right.
All of that's going to go too.
How about the Cowboys at Oklahoma State? That guy's got a gun that he blows off.
Oh,
doesn't he?
absolutely.
You got his
Pistol
pistols,
Pete.
yeah, Pistol Pete.
Pistol
Yep.
Pete.
And your son was blowing off a cannon during every score.
Yeah, he was just doing it the last game. He started the game.
Well, I mean, high schools are obviously on a heightened level of sensitivity right now. But as always, things like that go a little too far. Political correctness goes a little too far. And I mean, she's a high school student. She is on the archery team. I don't think it's too far fetched. She would want a picture with her bow and arrow put in the senior portrait.
And her, arrows in the quiver on the back.
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty cool shot. I mean, and there's another girl, I guess, that had an American flag jacket with an American flag background, and that was considered insensitive to the Muslims and the I forget the religious background.
Maybe Sikhs or
Sikhs, yeah, at the school that were upset, and so that portrait was not allowed in the yearbook as well, and that caused some controversy too.
The problem is that you allow, in many cases, people that are not trained to make these sort of decisions. I mean, they go to school to teach people, not to make censorship decisions about whether or not this falls within the confines of a violent depiction, which is a Star Wars.
Well, they have to make a knee-jerk reaction decision as well, which is hard for them to do.
And when they make, just go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like after a terrorist event, you'll see people driving around or yelling at individuals who might have a turban on, and not realize they're Sikhs, and they're in no way, shape, or form even closely.
No, they're usually from the Punjab in India.
Yeah, and they're Hindu.
Well,
they're not Hindu. They're amalgamation. They're Sikh.
Yeah,
but there was a controversy at the same thing, Denver Broncos game. It was a couple days after the San Bernardino shooting. They were not allowing Bronco fans in that had the turbans on, and they ended up getting in.
Ridiculous.
They ended up getting in
because they were Sikhs as well.
Right, they ended up getting in, but obviously it caught fire on Instagram and Facebook immediately, and
that just shows they're ignorant, right?
The cure to this is education.
Exactly.
Oh.
Just because somebody has a turban on doesn't make a Muslim. Doesn't make somebody if they've got
because
a hijab on.
I was just in Thailand, in the southern part of Thailand, where it's near Malaysia, and there's lots of Muslims there, and they love Americans, right? And they people that are friendly and people that are generous, they tend to embrace. But then we've got Donald Trump saying all these things about banning Muslims, and they start to wonder whether or not the United States is anti-Muslim in general. And a lot of it has to do with ignorance on all sides.
Well, one of the most famous American Muslims came out against that last week, and a lot of people forget he's actually Muslim. Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, exactly.
Made
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yep.
Made a statement about that. So it's kind of interesting it gets that far.
Yeah, it does. So that's the free speech issue pertaining to a private citizen uttering something that's offensive within the confines of an employment setting. Completely, employers are fully able to curtail that sort of speech if it basically harms their business.
Absolutely.
Next, let's move on. Let's move on to this 15-year-old boy. And how do you pronounce that high school again?
Acalanes.
Acalanes. In Lafayette, playing Bellarmine, which I can pronounce because we used to play Bellarmine when I was at Sarah.
I think that's where Brandon Crawford went to, was Brett Bellarmine.
And so ultimately what happened is during a water polo game, a 15-year-old boy was videotaped, probably by the parents, because apparently water polo is pretty violent under the water, right?
It can get pretty violent. Even above the water, it can get pretty violent.
And you said that you've sustained broken bones? Or?
I had a guy who's taking a backhand in practice, caught his forearm on my nose, broke the side of my nose. My buddy Jim, when we were playing Pepperdine University, got kicked in the head, knocked out. It happens.
So what they're saying is that within the confines of sporting events, there's a primary assumption of the risk, which says during these sporting events, there's going to be things that happen. You slide into home plate, Buster Posey breaks a leg. It's not a legal issue. He doesn't have any lawsuit if he's playing Little League. He doesn't have any lawsuit within the confines of Major League Baseball. It's just part of the game. What they're saying in this case is that this kid's crossed the line. Instead of an inadvertent elbow or a knee, he did this on purpose. They're imputing intent upon him and saying this is an intentional act of assault, which is the apprehension of being hit, and then the battery, which is actually being hit, and they're charging him with a felony. So the question becomes whether or not we want to allow law enforcement to make the decision within the setting of a sporting event that it's better for the criminal system to take control rather than being suspended from school, rather than missing games, rather than being suspended like Rajon Rondo was, whether or not being suspended from basically hockey like Marty McSorley was. Those type of issues. I mean, what are your opinions in regards to whether or not this crossed the line?
Well, number one, a 2-meter line is like a goal line defense when you've got everybody right there on the line. It is that one area 6 feet within the goal, and it gets pretty violent in there because the only way you can get in there is you have to have the ball. It's like soccer. It'd be an offsides if you're inside the 2 without the ball. So it's traditionally an area where there is a heck of a lot of action. There is a heck of a lot of arm movement, legs. Everything is going on in that area. So if it was out by the 5 meter or half tank, it might be a different call. And then the ref, at the game, is very focused when the ball's in that tight, and would have had complete control over it because those struggles can go on for several
Yeah,
seconds.
they didn't call a foul in this case.
Yeah, so if there's no foul called there, I would think it would be, way outside the realm of criminal liability if the ref that's trained to watch these and look for ejections, like in hockey, when you have an ejection and you go into a man up or a man down position, water polo does the same thing. So if you have an ejection, the ref would have caught that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ref could have red carded him, thrown him out for the game, and had him tossed for another game after that one. So if the ref didn't say anything, I really would be remiss to have the criminal justice system involved.
I mean, outside of the video showing this kid doing something completely egregious, which I would assume did not happen since the ref didn't even call a penalty on it, there's absolutely no reason for the criminal system to get involved in it. This is not their place. They've got enough problems to deal with. I mean, I don't know anything about water polo. How is it possible that someone's head would even be by a knee? I mean,
No,
how would that happen?
Well,
I mean,
typically it's when there's a ball turnover. Let's say he's in the 2, he takes a shot, it's blocked, then the ball's getting cleared out of the 2-meter area, and you're heading down for a break to go in the opposite direction. So when you start leaving, you throw a foot and catch somebody while they're turning towards you and you're swimming
You
away.
do that on purpose?
Oh, yeah, you can do it. Typically, if somebody's coming up on your side and the ref's not looking, you can toss an elbow back and catch somebody in the face.
Wow.
in lacrosse, we used to take your hand a little bit off the bottom of the stick, and when they would the offensive player would kind of be leaning on you, you'd stick it right in his hip, where the pad would come off because it'd been worn down a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of a little sportsmanship.
Craig, you've done open water swimming, and when you're coming up to that buoy, everybody gets in kind of tight.
Yeah.
Now imagine it, because think of it, freestyle swimming, arm over arm, the Australian crawl, some people call it, and you all of a sudden throw one of your elbows back. You're not taking the full stroke forward, and all of a sudden you just jam it back and catch somebody in the head.
Yeah,
you can do that in a game.
They do that in Ironman. I've done 5 of them now, and every time you get to a buoy, they start throwing elbows, they start crawling over you.
I told you,
And that
take
part
it
of
wide.
it is not comfortable.
Do they wear helmets in water polo?
No, you have a
You
cap.
wear your caps. All right,
Okay.
so
Just has ear protector.
I've gotten the C, which does not stand for Craig. It stands for we're taking a break. So this is All Things Legal on Money 105.5. When we come back, we'll talk about self-driving cars and whether or not they're a menace to South Central.
People, you can make me scream. You just talk too much.
Apparently, we do talk too much, but
That's Craig's theme song right there.
if we got paid by the word, I'd be retired by now because
About
I
the syllable.
I'm loquacious, vociferous, and like to use the English language. So before we took the break, ultimately we indicated that we'd be talking about autonomous vehicles and or better known as self-driving vehicles. Google's taking the lead. We've got Mercedes, we've got Ford, we've got Volkswagen, we've got Honda. They're all trying to get in touch with the technology, get ahead of it so they don't get left behind. And the issues that are interesting to us is how the legal system is going to deal with this completely new technology. There is a point if there are these autonomous drivers on the road and the electrical grid goes down, who's responsible for that? Can you imagine the chaos that happens if the GPS systems all go down and the communication with the car to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure goes down? You're going to have, massive, complete chaos.
The anarchy.
And we were talking before. I mean,
in the UK.
we think that technology is perfect because we watch Mission Impossible or those crime scene shows where they can figure out the evidence by using DNA and all this other technology, and it works every time. And whenever you watch shows about the FBI or the CIA, it looks like they never make a mistake. They're infallible. They hit a couple buttons and 50 screens come up and it spits out the answer within a second. But then you kind of interact with Siri and you say, good Thai food. And they say, Barney's looking for ties.
Yeah.
so
I think the worst one was the one I sent to you, where we're going to do the Alcatraz swim. And I was doing stuff with my son Zach, you're all, where are you? And I said, I got tied up with Zach's stuff. And the text goes out, I got tied up with sex stuff. And you said, take your time. And I looked down and I go, what the heck?
So the point is that the technology with Siri is inconvenient, and we can all decipher that Thai food and neckties are not the same, right? And I wasn't sure about you and being tied up in sex.
I just sent it. I didn't even look at it.
So
or
that kind
read
of
it.
confused me for a second. I said, well, maybe he's not swimming Alcatraz, but he's having a good time. So the point is that technology is not infallible, and now we're potentially going to have vehicles that are going to be driving themselves. And we talked about it before. So is there going to be no driving age at this point? If the cars really can drive themselves, do you send 9-year-old Johnny, off to school in your car, or send Johnny out to In-N-Out Burger and Johnny can do his own shopping, or just basically, do we do that? Are you DUI when you're behind the wheel? The issues are there have been 4 accidents with self-driving cars, and they all say that they're not Google's fault or Delphi's fault.
Of course,
But they say they all happen
Not our fault.
under 10 miles an hour. So what can happen is if you're going 10 and the speed limit's 35 and an accident happened, then you may bear some responsibility, because it's not reasonable to anticipate somebody going essentially 10% or 20% of the speed limit.
Yeah. I mean,
Go ahead, Ed.
I did know one person was like that all the time. It was my grandfather. When he just drove, when he'd actually leave the house, we could run next to the car.
So one of the issues we talked about, and these are now proposed rules coming out of the DMV, and it happened yesterday, and I think there's going to be a hearing on these proposed rules on January 28th, and there are going to be a lot of the manufacturers there. Google's going to be there, et cetera, because the technology and the rules, depending on how the rules work out, Google may step ahead because they've been going with no steering wheel and no brakes,
pedals, right?
versus all the other ones basically have the same sort of vehicle which you could take over from. So it's a totally different type of technology. So the DMV proposed rule said, look, bottom line is it's not going to be the manufacturer's fault. If an accident happens, the driver is going to have to be behind the wheel and take control of the vehicle. And if an accident occurs, it's going to be the same sort of liability, which is going to be really good news, I think, for the insurance companies, because they make a very good living as a result of insuring the risk associated with auto accidents. And if the risk is still on the driver, then that at least creates that market in a more limited way, but it still maintains it.
Well, it makes you have a level of responsibility. I mean, if we're going to have autonomous cars and you're not able to take over the vehicle in a dire situation, to me, I mean, maybe it's because I've been used to having pedals and a steering wheel in front of me. I don't want to get into a car, even if it's driving itself, that doesn't give me the option to take it over in case something goes wrong. The grid goes down, or the tire blows out, or a kid jumps out in front of my car. I want to be able to override it and stop it. I mean, that's just, I wouldn't be able to give up that much of control to a robot. I mean, and I see where the DMV is coming from, is they want to ensure that even if you are drunk in your vehicle, you're going to get hit for the DUI, because if you're not cognizant enough to stop the car in case of an emergency situation, you're still going to be held responsible for it. And I agree 100%. I don't agree that, however, the manufacturers are completely taken off the hook for this. There has to be some percentage of liability on each side, because if the car crashes because the system died, that's not my fault as an owner.
I would think standard products liability law would still be applicable to any autonomous car if it didn't meet the consumer expectation, or if they could have put in a safety device that would have cost very little for the cure that it would create. Yeah, they should absolutely be on live.
Yeah, the proposed rule is that it holds motorists responsible for obeying all traffic laws. It's nothing really changes.
Yeah.
So products liability is still fits within the confines of us obeying traffic laws, and the issue becomes, let's say you're not obeying a traffic law and you hit a telephone pole and you go through the windshield because your airbag didn't deploy. So even though you're at fault, you may have a products liability cause of action for the brain trauma that you sustained as a result of the airbag not deploying, because the vehicle is more dangerous than a reasonable consumer would expect. So because they kept the rules the same there, then all the other rules will fall into place and there would be no change. The way that would change is if the DMV says, look, bottom line is they're not driving, so it's autonomous, and that means autonomous. And therefore, the person in the vehicle bears no responsibility, just like if you're on a train. You were talking about that.
Yeah.
There's autonomous transportation all over the place.
Yeah, public transportation. But, it's interesting. Let's say you got 3 people in the car, and they're all sitting in the back seat, and the autonomous vehicle does something where the police pull it over. Who gets the ticket?
Car owner, I guess. I mean,
Well, I
So
mean,
it's a borrowed car.
yeah, I don't know.
well, you'd have to get a driver's license for the vehicle. You'd have to name the vehicle.
Yeah, just Google one.
Charlie.
I mean, yeah, Dave.
Dave
no.
Charlie.
What was the one on 2000? Hal.
Hal,
That's
yeah.
my car, Hal.
So Hal gets a ticket.
Yeah, Hal's got to go to court.
Hal,
now.
your rates are going to go up.
Can Hal go to driving school? Keep this off his record.
That's right.
Get the point off. Yeah.
Yeah, but somebody still has to be responsible.
That's right, man. That's funny. All right, so the other proposed regulations that would require consumers to get a special state-issued driver certificate after receiving training from a car company on how to use a driverless vehicle.
I think that's
It
fair.
seems counterintuitive. If it's a driverless vehicle, why do you have to learn how to use it?
Because you're gonna have to take it over. I mean, I don't think Google's idea of no cars, no steering wheel, no pedals is gonna work. I mean,
Well, the other thing is, too, let's say it is a driverless vehicle, truly driverless, autonomous vehicle, and it's going to go from point A to point B. But for whatever reason, it needs to be pulled over. They'd have to build in some type
You're
of
right.
mechanism where the police could,
Stop
in
it.
some way, shape, or form, direct information to that vehicle to stop it. And if they could do it from an outside source, a hacker could do it.
Yeah, that's true.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's got to be so many more steps before this is approved.
Well, yeah, and these are part of the rules. The autonomous cars would also have to pass a test administered by a third party before being sold. And then automakers would only be allowed to lease the driverless cars as opposed to selling them outright.
A bank robber runs out to his autonomous car and jumps in.
Acapulco. Basically, because the laws require the driver to be capable of taking control, this kind of affects Google. They have it's Alphabet Inc., and they're trying to come up with technology where you really there's no steering wheel, there's no brakes. So this is not really a rule that they're happy with based upon the fact that their technology is going in a different direction. So this is kind of like VHS versus beta, going way back, right?
Well, I mean, every once in a while, you've been on the freeway and you'll like see the driver next to you, or they'll see you and they'll say, "Hey, could you go forward? Because I need to get
Right,
in
I need to
and
get
off."
in, right.
How do you do that to an autonomous car?
Well, the
I mean,
way
how do they extend courtesy? How do they know when to stop short so somebody making a left can get across into a driveway? There's a lot of stuff that they won't do that you do on a daily basis, as a part of society and being a good citizen.
So one of the things that they also address, which means that they're actually thinking pretty broadly here, automakers must submit monthly reports regarding the performance and safety, and even more importantly, they must report what they're doing with the information about that they're gathering about the people and the vehicles, because part and parcel of being in an autonomous vehicle is that you always know where it is.
Yep.
So then whoever's collecting that data knows whether or not you're going to Neiman Marcus, whether or not you're going to In-N-Out Burger, whether or not you're going to Makuni. Bottom line is they're going to have information about where you travel, and they can use that information to sell to advertisers, and it's very, very valuable. That's how Facebook is making all this money now,
Yep.
because they take the information about your likes and dislikes and who your friends are, and then they can tailor the advertising specifically to you, which is making them a lot of money.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at the article you gave us, four self-driving cars crashed in the last 9 months. Out of 50, that's an 8% failure rate within 9 months. So it's only 3/4 of the year in. So it's really, if you add the remaining quarters, it's a 10% failure rate.
Yeah, so the thing is that it's not infallible, and we're all familiar with the technology. And as a matter of fact, because we're personal injury attorneys, we see this all the time. We have a case right now where a seat failed and hit a little boy in the head and collapsed his skull. Fortunately, it looks like he doesn't have any cognitive deficit, but the technology that in this case was the seat and its ability to maintain a moderate to minor rear end collision failed. So technology fails all the time. And it's no different in regards to software and hardware, et cetera. And because there is an implication that these things can be cyber attacked, there is an implication that ultimately the electrical grid could go down through a cyber attack, then the chaos could ensue. And I think these proposed rules are going to be changed dramatically as we get closer to this happening. And the interesting thing is the federal government now, the Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox, a couple years ago, they basically said there should be limited testing and not authorized for use by members of the public for general driving purposes. Now they've changed this to reflect today's technology, and there's a quote-unquote sense of urgency trying to bring innovation to our roads that will make them safer. So basically, they're encouraging now this technology going into the market, and that's coming from the federal government. Now we've got California involved, Texas is involved, Nevada's involved. The cool thing is that all this technology is happening in Palo Alto. Mm-hmm. And so all this innovation and all this extra money, guess where it's coming?
California.
To the greatest
Yep.
state in the union, California.
No, it's that part of it is fantastic. I mean, the fact that it's continuing the growth in the state. But I mean, I do like the fact that DMV is getting out in front of it. I mean, it's there's got to be some type of way to hold the driver responsible, because you can't just throw up your hands. I didn't know the car was going to die. I mean, you have to be able to have some type of
I forgot to charge it, man.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff. There's got to be a level of accountability. And in this day and age, it's tough to get accountability on people. So I'm glad the DMV's out in front of it.
There's a lot of lawyer jokes based upon general stereotypes. It happened not to be true based upon misinformation. There are just
Almost
as many,
all of them are untrue.
There are just as many jokes about the DMV and their level of productivity and their ability to make things happen in a efficient and quick manner. An alacritous matter. And in this case, the DMV stepping up, and it looks like they've got a pretty broad, forward-thinking understanding as to how to properly deal, at least in the short term, with the liability issues, how the manufacturers have to basically get the cars in the hands of the consumer, and then what we do with the right to privacy issues pertaining to following these vehicles around. They gave us some good thought.
They did. It's going to be a whole brand new section of the law. I mean, it's going to be interesting how it all plays out. And how it's enforced.
It's funny, like you bring up the DMV and all the jokes and stuff. And, I'm thinking, I've been licensed since age 16. I'm 50, so that's 34 years. I can't ever remember having an issue ever with the DMV.
Well, make sure you always say nice things about it because that could change. All right.
It's always been smooth.
I just, very nice, Ed. That's perfect. You will now get your driver's license.
Thank you, guys.
And I totally agree. So I just got the C, which means we're taking a break. Usually I think that means Craig, but that's not it. This is Money 105, the Wall Street Business Network. This is All Things Legal, and we'll come back and talk about criminals with cameras.
It's All Things Legal with Craig Ashton from the law firm of Ashton & Price on Money 105.5.
All right, we're back. I got to say, though, the music that went into the brought us in from the last break was funnier than that kind of jazzy feel. But bottom line, it kind of got me in the mood to talk about with criminals with cameras.
I like it.
What we talk about often is within confines of what we do for a living. Video is super helpful. We never want to prosecute a case that ultimately has no merit. That is against the oath that we took, and it's also overburdens the civil system with causes of action that have no merit. The nice thing about what happens now, and if we have a slip and fall where there is a duty of reasonable care owed, and let's say there's a leaking freezer and water's been on the floor for hours and somebody falls and breaks their shoulder, then at least we'll have a video to determine how long the water was there. There's a very famous case about a banana peel. A person fell in a railroad station, and the whole crux of the case is what color was the peel. If it was yellow, hadn't been there for very long, we're not going to require them using reasonable care to pick up a yellow banana peel. But if it's brown, it's been decomposing, it's been there for a while, they're not using reasonable care, they owe that duty, and if the person falls and hurts themselves, then there's liability. So video is super helpful for us. It happens in auto accidents, it happens in slip and fall cases, and we can make a very quick determination was whether or not there's a legitimate reason to move forward and whether or not our client should avail themselves of the legal process. So video is super important in regards to your impression. If you are involved in a family law dispute, if you're getting a divorce, don't be putting pictures of yourself on Facebook with two girlfriends in Vegas. It's not going to be helpful for your custody battle. If you're injured, and you say that your life is over, don't videotape yourself and put it on Instagram bowling or playing golf or
Finishing a marathon
or wrestling.
Or playing basketball with your dead sister.
So, those are issues that are case killers.
That is a true story, yes.
Because those are things that take away the subjectivity and allows people to cut through the verbiage and the storytelling and look at something that is a much more objective understanding as to how these events should be interpreted. So we've got a couple real idiots here. This one guy's a romantic idiot, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
I don't know if he gives the benefit of the doubt, man.
Because if you're acting as an idiot for love, we've all done that. So this guy basically decided he was going to ask his girlfriend to marry him, and he was on Highway 145, which is apparently one of the biggest and busiest freeways in the entire country.
Yes.
It's outside of Houston.
I've been on that freeway.
So he had his family follow him at their favorite spot because he'd taken her on a motorcycle there before. Family followed him in the 3 different lanes, stopped traffic, got her out of the car, got on one knee in the middle of the interstate, which, romantic in the middle of a oil spill and perhaps some car fumes and, the waft of diesel, which is always leading to
it got
the
to her
sense
head.
that, this is romantic.
Cacophony of horns and yelling.
He popped the question, and the fiance said, I didn't know if it's a good or bad idea. I was just so caught up in the moment. And so what happened is that he put this on Instagram, and then the Houston police saw it.
As they should.
And at that point, they're looking to charge him with obstructing traffic.
Absolutely. I have no problem with them doing that. I mean, the narcissism of this guy is unbelievable. I mean, what if someone's not paying attention, has to slam on their brakes because of this, plows into his family's party and kills him and his wife standing in the middle of the. I mean, the stupidity of this.
What if there was an ambulance taking
Right.
somebody in an emergency situation,
Fire truck,
or
anything,
truck,
man.
or anything?
All kinds of liability.
the level of narcissism of some people is baffling. I mean, and the next person in the story is even more unbelievable.
So from a legal perspective, if an accident happens, he's going to have civil liability for negligence for their lost income, their pain and suffering, and their medical expense. If there is an accident that causes significant injury, it could be a felony. Somebody dies, it's going to be probably homicide.
Absolutely.
So he's lucky he dodged this, and that Instagram would have been the nail in the coffin in regards to the prosecution for all of these things, and he may just get lucky with just a traffic violation.
Well, hopefully he does get some type of violation. I mean, because if you don't punish that, then someone else is going to do it again.
I would make him pick up trash on I-45.
That's a crazy freeway too. I've been on that freeway. I was in Houston a couple years ago for a Giants series. Traffic in Houston is nuts, and I mean that freeway is a crazy freeway. I've been on that freeway, and I can only imagine what happened if it got shut down like that. I mean,
Well, he's planning his reception on the I-5 interchange.
Oh, which is
please, just not in Sacramento. Please don't.
All right, so yeah. His honeymoon on Route 66.
No.
All right, so then we got this Florida woman who's even more of an idiot.
This is a Darwin Award right here.
So she gets hammered. She's in Lakeland, Florida, and she's using what's called Periscope, which I've never heard of, but apparently you can put in your car. It's part of Twitter, and it basically shows you all over. Anybody who wants to
It's a
watch
live
all
broadcast,
over the
yeah,
world what
yeah.
you're doing. And she's talking about how drunk she is. She's got a flat tire. So a bunch of people called into 911, said this lady's driving drunk. Fortunately, somebody in the LPD, the Lakeland, Florida Police Department, knew how to use Periscope, figured out where she was, and she got arrested for DUI. Right on.
As she should have been.
No, I actually like what the article said. They're like, what, Periscope? Luckily, one of our younger officers was able to figure it out.
I know.
Luckily, someone that was recently in their 20s knows how to use Twitter.
And my beautiful girlfriend, Tanya, who looks 25 years younger than she is, has two young daughters. And so they have imparted upon her the understanding of technology, which I get to use, which is great because I understand how to use most of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I just get to the point where I don't really need to figure out too much more technology. And at the end of the day, the younger, and that's why we have a very young switched-on staff, all basically in their 20s and 30s, who basically understand how to use technology. So it's super, super helpful. And you're young, Tim. So
I'm only 36, so yeah, I'm still pretty tech savvy.
So are you periscoping?
No, I know what it is, but no, man. I'm an attorney. I'm not putting any type of my life on blast anywhere, man. If I learned anything from law school, it's to not put anything like that there in public.
Periscope
man.
seems like a FaceTime, but instead of 1-to-1, it goes out broadcast.
Yeah, it's
wide.
basically, I mean, whoever wants to watch it could be broadcast to none if no one's on your Periscope station or your Twitter page. But, I mean, whoever wants to watch it. So, luckily, people that were watching it were her friends, and luckily someone was smart and was her true friend and reported her because it's not like this went across the
she's
nation.
lucky she didn't kill somebody.
Right,
or kill
yeah, I
herself.
mean, it's...
Yeah, and for the prosecutor, I mean, it's demonstrative evidence. If it's
it's
captured,
slam
and two,
dunk.
the statement she's making, you hear her saying she's drunk. She says, I'm effing drunk. These are all admissions that are now going to be used against her at her criminal prosecution.
Well, there's another genius here in Sacramento who I don't know the company, and I won't say it because we don't have advertising with them. But it's it's a major shipping company, and their employee stole a bunch of stuff. And like a genius, he wore his actual jacket that had his name on it. So there's video of this hooded guy with a jacket with their name on it taking stuff in and out of the warehouse, and obviously he was caught the next day. I mean, it's just people they just don't think, man. They do not think.
All right, so we're about ready to be done with the show. So let me go to Drone Tread on Me. Ultimately, there are new rules now with the FAA, and you're going to have to, if you're 13 or older and you purchase a drone before December 21st, 2015, you must register the device by February 19th, and that's for any drone that's over half a pound up to 50. If you violate the rules, there could be penalties through the FAA up to $27,000 for civil, $250,000 for criminal. And that doesn't even stop the negligence. So if you're flying your drone near an airplane and an accident happens, then guess what?
You're in trouble.
Millions and millions of dollars of liability. The rules are you got to stay away, I think, 5 miles from any airport. Most of the violations have happened in New York City and New York, New Jersey.
Figure that.
They've had a total of 86 violations of the no-fly, no-drone zone, as they say. So this is now starting to become a technology. It started out as a toy, but now the FAA is involved, and there's legal issues pertaining to strict products liability, to negligence, and now federal liability, which are through civil penalties and through criminal liability.
You had a good point, Ed. Yeah,
I was going to say, I didn't look up what the definition of a drone is, but you buy your kid a toy helicopter, a radio frequency control that's more than 8.5 ounces. Now you have to go register that with the FAA.
It's only $5.
Yeah,
and the idea is that I think it's a good idea because that thing crashes and you just look at who's registered to and you know who's responsible.
But yeah, toys. And then you have these guys who go down the remote control planes that they're flying. They all have to be registered now. All these things that have been going on for years and years and years are now being registered. It just,
All right.
it's kind of weird.
Well, you're saying drone tread on me. So
Yeah.
bottom line is that's the show. I think I'm going to be here for Christmas Eve, which is next Thursday. And I don't know if you guys
I
have
can't
to stick
guarantee
to it.
anything.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve's a big day in my wife's family, so I will be on children duty, I'm sure.
Well, anyone-
if you don't mind the 2 kids running around the studio, I could be here in the morning, man.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa,
Chanukah.
Happy Hanukkah. Thank you very much for listening. This is Craig Ashton, All Things Legal. Have a great day.
Festivus.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the All Things Legal Show with your host, Craig Ashton, on 105.5 KSAC. For more information, go to ashtonandprice.com, see them on Facebook, or call 916-786-7787. Remember, for the best advice, don't think twice. Call Ashton and Price.